So I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes, but we just talk about SaaS,
Yeah,
basically.
I was going to say, is the name changing? It's getting hammered. So is this going to be the AI podcast now?
Yeah, I got into a lot of trouble actually over the last 48 hours.
Because of the name, you mean?
I
Or
publicly posted something about how the SaaS sell-off is not violent enough. Um,
What did people say when you said this?
uh, yeah, I made a comment on X about like how I just don't believe that traditional SaaS pricing is like a way to basically it's like the sell-off in the public markets for big trad SaaS is like not severe enough because I just don't see how you can endure very large revenue over time. And there are I think there are other better pricing models on a go forward basis. And then I made the comment that like, given this reality, like even we are shifting. And then a bunch of our customers saw that and then they reached out to their account managers and they were like, your CEO said this thing. What does this mean for us? And then I had to do like internal cleanup and then external cleanup. And anyway, it was a whole thing. But yeah, I just don't see how like old trad 1.0 SaaS survives over the next 2 years. Like I think you have to have like one of the following. You need to ads, fintech, compute, or data. Like those are the only ways to actually survive. Um, but that's just my opinion. So
specifically, so we don't assume different things. You're specifically referring to the per seat pricing aspect of it. Or is there more to it?
I think I think three things. One is I think like per seat pricing is going away. The second is I think software that is like workflow software that is not underpinned with unique data of some variety is going to be hard to retain. And then I think the traditional way you sell SaaS, so like you hire a big sales team and you do like calling and then you sell the SaaS product, I don't think that's going to retain either. And so that was actually what I was mostly talking about is like those things seem unlikely to like continue to hold. Like I don't think you can build a public company that way. I just don't think it's possible. And I think the public markets are of that view. Yeah. I don't know what you guys think.
I
I'm
actually
curious what
think
you.
that your thesis is true if companies continue to operate like based on the status quo, um, just even from like an operational like expense point of view. But also, what also is becoming true is that all of these businesses are becoming a lot easier to operate and a lot less cost effective to operate and maintain and keep live. And so, like, I actually think there's probably like a bridge reality in which a well-run sort of like 1.0 SaaS company can just become super efficient um, over like the next few months and like or years and become like a really really viable like cash cow. Um, and so like their survival thing, it kind of depends on like where you set your ambition to be. Um, and I also think I don't know like I do just feel like we are so much like in a bubble. I was this last week I was at like a ski retreat um, with like one of these like business groups I'm a part of called Hampton that has like a bunch of different industries in it. And I would say like most of the people that are in Hampton are also like pretty digitally native businesses, even if their core business is not super digital. And I just became like super like clear to me that there is just like a lot of noise still with this whole thing. Um, and I don't think it's going to be like dramatic as long as the business is like, again, not just going to be like, oh, status quo as usual. Like if you just make mildly decent decisions, I don't think that there's like a massive issue towards the model or
Okay.
threat.
Yeah, I think we roughly agree because my point was more about the public stock market value of these companies, which you have to discount future cash flows on, which means that I think we're saying different things. You're saying like, can you make money from these businesses? I think the answer is yes. And I actually wrote that in one of the responses. I think you can make a lot of money from these businesses if you run them well. I just don't think you should buy the stock. And so I was mostly commenting on the sell off in the public markets because I think it's really hard to discount the future value of these types of companies. because you don't know over what time horizon it just slowly depletes, basically.
So if you believe that to be true, do you think that potentially Fermat has been capitalized in a really non-efficient way? Because like you've capitalized future cash flow of Fermat based on like not public market comps, but like the VC route that public market comps got to, from that path. And so like, how do you think about that?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
like,
that
should
was what
something
I was at.
change?
Yeah, this was literally the question that I was asked that got me in trouble. And I responded. I'm going to give a response that's going to get me in less trouble. I think that if all we did was continue to build SaaS, then yeah, it's not. It is incorrectly capitalized, and you cannot underwrite the valuation. That is true.
Well, you got to
Does that
finish
make
that.
sense?
Where
I
do you
can't
go?
finish. I literally can't. I literally can't. Because this is how we get it. This is how I get in trouble. But like Zach's point is correct. Is all I'm trying to say. Like, like what we raised the B on, the world has changed. We raised our B last year, roughly at this time, plus or minus, right? And the world has moved. And there were elements of what we raised on that are still true and are going to produce the future enterprise value of the company. But the sort of like SaaS sales motion that we grew very fast on leading up to the B does not hold the same enterprise value anymore. That is for sure the case. Yeah. And both in my opinion, and I think like, I don't think like anybody would disagree with that, basically. What do you all think? What is your view of like the future of SaaS, Dipti?
I mean, to me, still, frankly, SaaS is a delivery model, right? I think that the legacy companies that don't rest on their laurels will make it, whether they're a SaaS company or not. Companies that fundamentally can't get off of. I actually think a lot in terms of, at least when I look at our world and our space, I actually evaluate a lot of legacy companies based on their ability to morph their data models towards an agentic future and assign sort of a likelihood estimate on can they or can't they, if that makes sense. That's a
I
lot of
completely agree with that. By the way, just, yeah, what is, sorry, before we jump ahead, like what does the business do? And yeah, how like what world does Crstl work in? And yeah, maybe share a little bit about the kinds of data that you're thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll keep it brief and then right. So Crstl, depending on who we're explaining kind of to what Crstl does, different contexts make sense. But for this audience, one way to think about what Crstl is it's a system of action for B2B transactions. So we are focused very much on the B2B trade and the B2B commerce side of things. And sort of our wedge and our hero use case was, right, this is going back a few years, iOS 14, et cetera, had played out, customer acquisition costs were rising, COVID was still a thing. And brands were basically starting to old was becoming new again, right? Brands were starting to diversify. They were looking to go omni-channel. But what they were finding is a lot of the tools at their disposal were old. And this was even pre-chat GPT, right? So this was the API economy was now, sort of front and center. Low code, no code was a thing, which obviously has changed a lot, obviously, in the world of AI. But that was sort of the genesis of Crstl, right? Is back kind of that 2022 time period. And so a lot of our initial customers have been customers that started out on Shopify Plus, and sell into Costco and Walmart, Target, distributors, and things like that. And then today, really, we've become a really powerful platform for buyers and sellers of all shapes and sizes, but squarely focused on B2B. And so we obviously see some very interesting data and sort of the context layer and the mission critical workflows around, depending again on who's sort of looking at this, they may resonate with sort of the order to cash flow side of it or the procure to pay, side of it. So there's all of those elements really blended in and sitting at the core of.
One of the things that when we last caught up that at least clicked for me was that it is like fundamentally the hard part here is that there's a lot of data that is like held in a bunch of different places that's hard for people to get access to. And then you want to like take advantage of that. Let me ask just sort of attaching this back to like the massive sell-off that we've seen over the last week. Like if I guess the way I think about this is if it was workflow only, do you feel like it would be just as valuable versus the fact that it is workflow and proprietary data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the proprietary data is very much at the heart of what we do. But then the workflows is what enables that insight into, I don't want to call gathering the data, that could sound a little uh, funky, but yeah, I mean, the workflows is what gives us access to the data, and the more workflows we enable, the richer, the deeper the data set is. So that sort of, we have therefore kind of very specific insights into that enterprise data, the context, who does business with whom, how much, when, how, etc.
Yeah. I think like my extreme example is, I mean, and this is the one that everybody talks about on X, which is not fair, is like Monday. Okay. Like no proprietary data, and it's like down 65% over the last year, right? Like purely a workflow thing. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how you would interact with that. Yeah.
My thought on that kind of stuff is that there's a price that somebody is going to be willing to pay forever to do something, right? And so like if your option is use Monday or build your own system that's an equivalent of Monday, there's a cost that is associated with both those options. And so it just depends on what price, how much can the price of Monday come down ultimately to compete against you vibe coding your own version of it, because there is a price, and I don't know what that price looks like. But I think the reason why Monday is falling so much, to your point, Rishabh, there's no if you don't have something that enables a value that a business couldn't get on their own by vibe coding this thing, and it's just a workflow, then there's going to be some sort of price that drops to. And I actually don't think that'll ever go to zero. But it could be that users look at Monday and they're like, okay, well, I'm not willing to pay more than $3 a month per user for this because of this, right? And so yeah, at that point, if it costs my business $60 a month, it's not worth me trying to vibe code this thing. This works well enough. But if it's $3,000 a month, then a business owner may sit there and say, well, my team's just gonna build this thing and we'll run it internally. So there's going to be some sort of trade-off where I think software, even without AI as a part of it, or not strictly AI driven, can survive, but just at a very low commoditized price point.
You guys heard about how much a phone contract costs in India? It's like next to nothing, because the consumer's like, nah, I'm not going to pay it. They just switch, right, all the time. Apparently, that's what drives it. Whereas if you look at like Canada or the UK, people are switching all the time. And providers make it pretty easy to switch. I wonder if we're going to see, different software make it even easier to switch from Monday to, I don't know, Google Chat, which is free, or from Slack to Google Chat. You just click one button and your whole team's moved over.
Yeah. I think this is the exact problem. The exact problem is you have to ask, what is the direction of travel of two forces? One is the cost to switch and the cost to vibe code. And given the direction that those are both moving, your first point, Jeremiah, is the exact right point. You have to measure it against an alternative. These things don't live in absolutes. But the problem is that those two things are moving at incredible rates right now. And so when you are doing now I'm like a finance jockey sitting behind my like Claude assisted Excel sheet, because even I don't really need to do anything, right? And I'm like trying to do this discounted cash flow model. I'm like looking forward 3 years. I'm like, what price am I putting on the product?
And that's why I don't think like software's revenues. We go back to like the Monday example. I don't know what the revenue and profitability looks like, but I'm sure it's fine, and I'm sure it looks very different than their stock price does. Like I'm sure it's not down 65%. It's just that that 5 years from now, it's not going to be the same business that it is today, and that's what the market is looking at 5 years out, not today.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, it's whether for our business or in the context of SaaS sell-off, it's all about enterprise lock-in, right? And that's directly a function of, yes, the workflows, the underlying context, the surface area of what it's traversing almost, right? I'm less optimistic that, and maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong, but I mean, there's a plethora of software we all use, right? Like take the example of a feature flag software. Like, do we really have time to build and maintain our own feature flag software? Like, is that where I'm going to invest any of our time? Especially to the extent that, let's say, teams become more lean and efficient because of AI. That means there are fewer people to vibe code and maintain. And then are you going to go through just a bunch of consultants who are maintain? Like, I don't know who does that. So
I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the right question. I don't think you would ever build a feature flag software, but I think it would be wild to assume that Claude Code doesn't automatically feature flag. Like, if I asked you 5 years from now, do you think Claude Code will automatically feature flag? That's a high
yeah,
chance.
yeah, or
2 years,
in 6 months maybe.
yeah. Like, so now we're debating timing, right?
Right. Not an. It's not an if. It's a when. Yeah.
I obviously, I don't know Crstl super well, but I actually think that's a good example of a software potentially that's not as impacted, because how, like, are you going to go do all those things on your own if you're a business? I think it's a good spot to be in. It's a complex software. It's a niche. It's like there's a type of software where it's like, it's actually much harder to go the vibe coding route than to just work with somebody who's doing that on your behalf. So
Yeah. We got to kill the vibe trying to build this, like, for sure. Yes, I agree.
you said what?
I'm biased, but I agree. Yes.
Yeah. I agree too.
Well, in her
It's
case,
survey software.
yeah, in her case, it's impossible because there's a proprietary data asset that underlies the ability to do the workflow, right? So like, it's really good news. So, yeah, because everybody else is gonna like try to vibe. You know what I mean? Like, people are gonna try to vibe code like for mod from a year ago. Like, that is way more likely, right? Like, that's like a thing that is very possible. Yeah.
Rish, I'm going to take this clip to future investors. I'm like, you don't have to hear it from me. Rish said it. So thank you. Ready material. Slide 2.
I was gonna say proprietary data and then also knowledge and expertise matter. Like I told you guys a couple of weeks ago, I was trying to vibe code a trading bot. It's not going well. And it's not because the vibe coding isn't successful. It's because I don't know how to actually get like the math right. So there's like and AI doesn't either. So it's not like there's certain things that are just way harder to do, and maybe like that gets better eventually, but I think like the person who's done it for 20 years and knows what they're doing is probably going to be AI in that context. That has like the battle scars of losing, probably lost a lot of money on their way to getting this thing right. So I think there's just like the domain knowledge and expertise will still matter.
I think that taste is like the only thing that's going to matter like pretty soon. I used to think that product managers were the most useless people in the entire world. And like the traditional version of a product manager, I feel like is still like pretty useless. Like, they're kind of just a middleman bridge between talented people. But like the really, really good product managers have taste. You know, a designer without really good sort of like knowledge of the problem is like pretty useless. And like a developer without like really good like UX ability is like pretty useless. But like the one role that can actually transform into being like to killing both of them, I think, is like a really solid product manager that like knows enough technically and maybe has a few people on their team that they can like lean on, and like knows how things should be done, and then can kind of just like execute and iterate at like really, really incredible speed. Whereas like I think they used to be kind of like an anchor on teams that would be like they needed to get sign off from everywhere to push anything forward, and it was like the opposite. So I feel like that position can like completely 180 and can be like, and like in a weird way, it's like what my role had become in like the last year was like a product manager, because I wasn't in Figma anymore. I never had developed, and then now I found that like most of my time is spent like vibe coding, and it's incredible. It's way faster than if we were to take any sort of traditional route. But the reason why it's good is because I have like the context from both, and I feel like I have like pretty decent taste. And so like that's my biggest, in terms of like building software companies, I think it's just like people with taste that can execute is going to be like the only thing that's like really useful.
Yeah, I as a product manager prior to becoming a founder, I could not agree more. I think, I mean, I don't know if this is like a controversial / hot take, but like, yeah, product management might be the most important job of the AI era. I would agree. Did you guys see the Mexican standoff reference from Andreessen on that was floating around on X a couple days back? Yeah. I
Yeah, it
think
was
that
pretty good.
taste will trump, and then ability to look around corners, and also like to the extent that people are still the ones using software. So versus like a world where only agents are buying from agents and only agents are doing the work. And that was sort of the other related to that, which was like, I forget who it was. Maybe it was a Jason Halligan or somebody on Twitter said, and which I completely agree. I actually sent it to some folks on our team, which is like the other important job of the AI era, I really think will be the enterprise seller.
Yeah, my opinion, but yeah, I said this like a year ago to our team at our last offsite, is like with the end outcome with AI is that we all become pretty faces on a screen. Like we're just here to make the other person feel good, which is an important job. Like I was like recommending to a bunch of people to read Have you guys read Sapiens by any chance? Yeah, I think it's an excellent book and actually more relevant given what's happening with AI than ever before, in my opinion. Sapiens and Guns, Germs, and Steel are the two that I would recommend, but it like reminds you that we are like we are an animal of like so like we require social constructs basically, and we require to be able to talk to each other and do things together and organize together and things like that. And so that part of the human condition is not changing. And so and like yes, a bunch of the tasks that we do today will change, but that part of it is not going to change. So it's like a not unreasonable way to like think about what jobs will persist.
I gotta show you guys this tweet and get your thoughts on it. So this guy went from 0 to 1 in like a year, and he said this: apps are about to be worthless. It took me an hour or two to write this article. What happens when building a consumer app becomes something you can vibe code in an hour? What happens when there are 1,000 quit smoking or quit drinking apps? The answer is that software is going to turn into media. Consumers aren't going to pay a subscription. They're going to consume like they read articles and like they consume apps. 5 years from now, or maybe even one, app's going to become a content marketing strategy, piece of value you put out into the world in order to sell your real product. And they're saying selling attention or selling physical atoms. What do you guys think?
I mean, maybe, but like mobile consumer apps were kind of already here. Like there were already just commoditized things that were being, coded in Eastern Europe, and they only were businesses that were, and many of them are our customers where their entire business is it's a performance marketing company, not like an app company. And so like I don't necessarily know if much has like changed in that category outside of like, I still don't believe that the average person is going to download Replit on their mobile phone. So like we're talking about consumer apps, so like no, I don't think that that's like very accurate. Like the only thing would be like if Apple came out with like an incredible vibe coding, but it's not really, it's more of just like a all-in-one agent, create things for yourself thing. But I don't think this happens from like a third party outside of the hardware.
And from an AI point of view, I feel like all Apple's done is made something really annoying when you accidentally squeeze your phone. You're like, oh, fuck, this thing doesn't work. Just turn it off.
I mean, I'll even say something that might get me like banished, vibe coding or not, like end to end, like building end to end solutions, taking care of customers, like any of this stuff and doing it consistently at a high bar is work. And I don't know that everyone wants to work hard, truly. And to your point, Zach, yeah, I agree. I don't think the average person is going to download Replit and stick to it and do the work that's needed. So I in some ways, I think it's, they say like the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's going to be probably a case of that, which is like AI or not, like it's whoever puts in the work consistently and shows up every day. And by that, I don't mean like an individual person, right? A team, whatever it might be, is still the one that's going to win. And I don't know that goes away in the age of AI. It changes, I'm sure, but I don't think it like goes away.
The only thing I think is maybe accurate about his tweet is his comment about people's willingness to pay for subscriptions. Like I'm always blown away by like the frugalness of the consumer when it comes to like tools and apps, whereas like I'm the opposite, just like this is the cheapest thing ever. And so the only thing I could see that maybe drives this in some reality is that like consumers are, I think, increasingly more frugal over time about like digital sort of things and consumption. And so like I can see potentially there being some sort of like price erosion or something, but I don't think that the average person's going to be vibe coding their own stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think the other buyer that is highly impacted is tech companies because they are going to download Replit. And so like I like broadly agree. I think like the average consumer is more frugal than ever. They are not an East Coast or West Coast person who has seen their wealth go up 4x because the stock market has gone up, notwithstanding the last 2 weeks, right? And so like the consumer is more frugal than ever. And I think tech companies are not more frugal than ever, but actually have more demands than ever. Because there are more demands being placed on them than ever. And so like a traditional SaaS tool just does not produce features fast enough that the tech company is going to be satisfied with the rate at which that vendor is moving. And so like, I mean, we have churned more traditional SaaS tools in the last 4 weeks than I ever thought possible. And there's like more coming. And none of it is because of price. All of it is because of feature problems. And I think we are not unique. Yeah, in this regard.
Yeah, I think it's business software that's impacted by this. I mean, the reality is like, if you're a consumer and you care about cost, vibe coding your own app is actually the most expensive thing you could do. It's cheaper to just go buy the thing for $2 a month. But for a business, it's a totally different equation because you're not spending $2 on a piece of software. You're spending 200, 2,000, 20,000, whatever that is. So I think in businesses are structured in a way where you have just more ability to actually produce something and maintain it. I still think though it's going to be mostly tech businesses that do that. Like my dad owns a grocery store. He's not going to be vibe coding his software. There's no way he wants to touch that. So if you are selling software to, if you're selling a POS software, like you're probably pretty safe. Just figure out how to make it better. That's not a category that you might have more competition, but your customers aren't going to be vibe coding their own software.
There are some categories that I do think are going to be surprisingly vibe codey. Like one is really unsexy markets that no super solid founder ever wanted to get into in the first place. An example is my brother runs a home services company, and like the people that build CRMs for like window cleaning companies are like the Z-class SaaS entrepreneurs. And so like the products are just horrible. Like I remember when I was trying to get him onto another CRM and we were looking at like specific CRMs in like this category, I was like, this is insane. Like, and I have another friend that runs like a deck sealing company, and he had showed me recently they have like a door knocking app that will show you, for their door-to-door salespeople, like when was the last time we knocked on this door and all these types of things. And they were using this one that everybody hated, but it was like kind of the one in the industry. It was kind of like the HubSpot. And he had vibe coded their own version with a companion mobile app that was like incredible because like they were so connected to the problem. And so like that's like an industry where you're like, oh yeah, is the average like painter gonna vibe code? It's like, actually, like I think they might because they're pretty underserved. Like as tech companies, we get really great software from like the best teams in the world. There might be this like the unexpected category actually might be disrupted a lot as well.
I actually think this is the underestimated insight, Zach, is that like everybody think, and especially in D2C ecom Twitter, like this is like the rhetoric is that it's going to make the price go down. This is like not the point at all. Like the point is that with AI and vibe coding, you can get better features. And so actually where you're going to see it the most is exactly in the situations that you're describing. The way, if I bought it from a vendor, I'm going to get something that I don't like. It could be a duct sealing company. It could be home services. In our case, it's ETL. Like we built something better than Fivetran for ourselves because Fivetran couldn't do what we wanted it to do, right? And so I think the shape that this takes is going to be a feature problem, not a cost problem.
Yeah, Zach, you just reminded me. My friend, he didn't vibe code his app, but he has one of the biggest apps in like Brazil and Paraguay for like restaurants. So it's everything from ordering ingredients to serving tables to takeout. It's like everything all in one. He didn't vibe code it, but it's still like a fairly big app, does very well. So there's even just that geographic component. And I think we see that in e-com as well. You've got all the Australian brands and British brands that just see what's working in the US and then go into a D2C brand in a different country.
We've been talking, or there's been this trend lately around buying boring businesses. Maybe the new trend is build software for boring businesses, vibe code software for boring businesses.
Yeah, I actually had this thought too when I was like watching my brother work on this and my other friend, who are like they're people that spend like a lot of time on computers. And when I open up a piece of software, like learning the software, there isn't really like a learning curve for most softwares that I buy. But it was like, well, what is the best and I thought about like onboarding flows. And it was like, well, onboarding flows like slowly show you different steps in the journey and you kind of like play with them and interact with them. I was like, well, the best onboarding flow for any software would be to like ask it to do something and then it does it. And then you see like a new button. And then you know that when I want this thing to be done in the future, I would click this button. And so it was like, outside of the features, outside of the price, like could also just like custom made software, if it got to that point, also just be like the best training tool for the person that's using it or the teams that are using it. It's like there isn't a learning curve. It's like as you get it to the place in which you need it to be, like you've actually learned 100% of the tool.
Yeah, like maybe the best onboarding flow is where there is no onboarding flow because it only presents itself when needed, as needed. Because we get this, I mean, we sort of fit into a bit of that sort of category where our customers they've been doing D2C ops, but now they're doing retail ops. It's a totally different muscle. The standard operating procedures, the language, just the wiring is completely different and they're not always prepared. Or maybe they haven't always correctly estimated what that shift may look like. And that actually morphs itself into support tickets and questions largely around domain expertise, like somebody was saying earlier, and how that then plays
Guys,
a
we realize
role.
we're in the fire. We're in the belly of it in ecom. We Foreplay, Zach doesn't know about this because he's on a ski trip, but we just lost a customer recently, big customer, because they built their own thing, right? And these are businesses, agencies in ecom that are heavied up with OpEx. They spend so much on labor, and most of this labor is just sitting around, right? Doing, running ads, sending emails, doing fairly basic routine tasks that I imagine are as close to getting fully automated as they can be, separate from the creative work. So they're building their own stuff, right? So we're in that replacement category. It reminds me of my first brand, actually. My first brand, as soon as we got like 500, 1,000 sales reliably, someone posted it online. And it ended up on all of these piracy websites where you could get my products for free. And then people would resell the products by tweaking them slightly. And so everyone would have them for free. So I had to release new stuff all the time. But one of my brands now, knock on wood, it's been a year and my bestseller is still my bestseller. So it's like, okay, let's hope this continues. But with my first brand, I was really in the belly of it. I had to continually adapt and make new products. Otherwise, sales were going to drop off the side of a cliff. So maybe we're uniquely in that category because we don't, build software for grocery stores. We build software for people who are, OpEx heavy businesses, and technically their labor can and will go start building their own stuff.
I was asked this by one of our investors last week, and I'm curious if you guys feel this way, that the biggest thing that has shifted is that you have to ship product at an unprecedented speed. And that is what the new expectation is. It sounds like everybody is okay. If you had to describe the shift, how would you describe it? like in your own organization? And what are you doing in your own organization to keep up with what you think the new expectation is?
I think we covered this a little bit a couple weeks ago, maybe, but the idea of things like annual planning, and I mean, Rishabh, it sounds like you were operate on a little bit faster timeline than we do, even, but we kind of look at, like a quarterly goal, but it's like, okay, what's the next thing that we're doing, and let's just do that thing, and that's the objective. And then I think the other piece of it that I think about constantly, I've been thinking about this for a long time, is how do we, like, that is true if you're in the just like pure software business. It's all about shipping features as fast as possible. So how do we actually get out of just being like a pure software play, so that we don't, the odds that we're going to be able to ship software faster than everybody else is actually small, in my opinion. I don't know that we're geared that way. We're not a bunch of like 20 somethings in in a basement or an Airbnb or whatever, shipping as fast as possible. So I think that's just the reality. Like, I don't want to work 80 hours a week. I've got a family. And so, like, what does that look like for me to think about that and try to, like, I like to work hard. I've always worked hard, but I can't put the kind of time in that I used to. So it can't just be about volume. It has to be about strategy and thinking beyond just just shipping features.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I really think in terms of problem surface area, right? I mean, this is sort of not a new concept, but I think, what was it, a couple years ago, 2 to 4 years ago, sort of this notion of compound startups was making the rounds, right? Whether you're Rippling and companies like that really very rapidly expanded their product suite. And so I think AI really enables that in a very, very real way. So how can you solve adjacent use cases that maybe normally would have taken you 2 years to get to, if ever? How do you really increase the surface area of the problems that you solve for your customers with higher quality? So
I love what you were saying, Dipti, earlier about work and how, if you compare this to consumer apps where there's like 10,000 variations of the weight loss, quitting smoking, I don't know, routine building apps or whatever it happens to be, there is going to be a tendency, or to what Zach was saying, most people aren't going to build apps. And even the people who do build apps will probably build something expedient because it's become easier. We were talking about this last week, actually, in terms of AI ad creative. There's an expedient path that you can take that's very lazy and actually probably the worst quality content. And that's not to say that the tools that you're using to make that are bad. It's just that optimizing for speed over quality, over actually solving a problem, over actually working to make things better, might not be the right goal. There are going to be a few people who actually, whether it's taste or it's forecasting consumer demand well, are going to solve real problems for their customers. And that's going to be the alpha, not shipping features as fast as possible. I don't know, maybe, right? But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's about putting in the work, right? Not doing the easy thing.
Yeah, the thing that has me rocked is like, and we talked about it, like a version of this, Jeremiah, a couple of weeks ago, but I think the thing that's rocked me is Anthropic or Claude is like releasing something every 2 days that's useful. And I've just never, I mean, have any of you guys like experienced anything like that from a single company? I mean, it's
No,
just crazy.
I think of like, I think of Intercom as a good example of like a software business and ability to ship new things over, let's say 10 years ago, right? What Intercom was doing, where they went from just like a help desk to like in-app messaging, and there's a bunch of other things too. But like, that's a good example. But that was like every 6 months there was a new drop, right? Which that felt good at that time. Like, oh wow, there's something new as an Intercom customer, that felt really great, and there was new value being created. But the speed of that is totally different than what it is now.
Yeah, Anthropic make OpenAI look slow. And I mean, I guess they're slow compared, right?
I think OpenAI is like burdened by their customer base. It's like, I don't think that there was like it was like the way the game board just like kind of fell and the pieces fell, and it's like, I wouldn't want to be OpenAI right now because they are just like burdened by this like massive prosumer, more consumer like category that like makes shipping features fucking horrible. Like weirdly, we have some of that kind of like drag, which is just like a bunch of people that use you for really service level stuff, which make it pretty hard to go deep sometimes. I think it's like an interesting place for them to be like strategically, because they can either like just like fully pivot into consumer, but I think that they know that that's like probably like not great long term. But then it's like, okay, then you need to somehow like shed whatever the weight that's being caused by this like consumer. That's what I think it is.
Yeah, it's their version of innovators dilemma.
It is. Just real quick on this, I think it's interesting. Claude, the chat version of Claude, has always been far inferior to ChatGPT, and I think that's like it stops you from using it unless you're serious about like a real use case that goes beyond just chatting, and that's actually probably the thing that's caused such a divergence where Claude is very business focused, and I mean I use it for business and I still use ChatGPT for a lot of personal. But I'm baking Claude into my business workflows in a way that I don't with Chat with OpenAI.
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell like what OpenAI does from here, but yeah, I mean, if you wake up one morning with like 800 million weekly active or whatever the new metric is, it's like you kind of have to serve that. Yeah. So, and then no matter what you do, the whole company gets pulled by that, right? So like, I'll give a really good example, like that's relevant to commerce. They don't have a choice but to think about the consumer experience of agentic shopping over the merchant experience. And so, like, if you're a merchant and you're wondering, how do I think about what to do about agentic shopping? I'm sure if you called people at OpenAI, they would like be helpful and things like that. But fundamentally, OpenAI has no choice but to actually be consumer first in how they answer that question, because there are 800 million people who are reliant on them to be consumer first in how they answer that question, right? Thankfully, they released an ads product. So now there is good aligned incentives for all parties, right? So like we should see more to like build a full ecosystem. But yeah, it just creates all of these weird dynamics, right? In terms of like where do you spend the time and how do you spend it, and where do you like what are the first problems you solve? Yeah, and creates a lot of opportunity, honestly, for B2B companies in support of the OpenAI ecosystem. So like an interesting outcome for B2B software builders like us is thinking about how those dynamics impact how we build relative to those companies, right? Because one of those companies has different incentives than the other, right? And so like an example of that, which I'm not saying that Anthropic is like a good actor or bad actor, but something as simple as Claudebot, they chose to go after him for naming an IP, or they discontinued serving the XAI customer base through Cursor, right? So this is like they told their customer to stop serving their end customer, right? And so there's all of these weird dynamics. Whereas like OpenAI, we haven't seen any of that from OpenAI, right? Like, can you think of any examples of that? And so anyway, I think it just like frames the B2B opportunity pretty differently because of the things that you're talking about.
Is it possible that the best outcome for chat or for OpenAI, I mean, ChatGPT specifically as a product is kind of what I'm thinking about here, but for that to actually be owned by a Meta or a Google where you actually have all the consumer data? Because I think their challenge right now is they don't have like the browsing data. They don't know what you're doing in different apps. I mean, maybe Apple's a good example of that, but they don't have the same access to that consumer behavioral data, and that's ultimately like what stops them from being a valuable consumer only play.
I mean, yeah, like if I could dream of anything, it would be for Apple to buy OpenAI because of how much of an Apple fan I am. And also, I mean, we still haven't, they haven't fully come out with like what the hardware product's going to be, right? And so it's like, yeah, like Apple hasn't made a meaningful hardware product in a very long time outside of AirPods. And so, yeah, like it could be the personal compute device of like the future. And I feel like it would probably be better if that was like in the hands of Apple than in the hands of OpenAI, like a long-term product point of view. But like, yeah, like I feel like yes. But I mean, I also think we're in like the beginning of the first inning still on where these companies end up going.
I mean, don't you guys think, to Rish, your point about having as large of a user base as they do, don't they almost have access to a data set that normal sort of telematics can't give you through sensors and things like that? Like, people are literally telling it what they think and how they feel.
Yeah, they have this interesting problem where, yes, in the context of the chat, but they don't know anything that happens off property. So one of OpenAI's like biggest challenges is like, and we know this because we come from the commerce world. Just think about like the quote unquote click through rate to the end brand's website, where like a lot of the rest of the activity happens for purchasing, right? So like commercial activity on the internet. They don't even have a pixel yet, right? There's no such thing as an OpenAI pixel. Much less like the full browser data, like what Google has, because you use Chrome. And so I think they know a lot about your behavior in any moment and how you're interacting with the chatbot. And so totally, they have like a depth of information in one dimension that is way deeper than anyone else has ever had in the history of technology. And they live in this funny duality where, on the other hand, they don't know anything that is happening outside of their ecosystem. And actually, very few other tech companies have this problem. Like Meta knows you across multiple devices because you're on Facebook on your desktop, you're on Instagram on your mobile phone, you're chatting on WhatsApp. So they actually have a more full view. Google has a more full view. Amazon has a more full view. And so like OpenAI is uniquely a large consumer company that does not have as full of a view, which is very odd.
The Google
Is
one's
that what
interesting.
Johnny Ive is through software? I have no idea. I haven't kept up.
I'm not sure. I mean, if I had to guess, like Fiji Simo is like going to solve this problem. But by the way, I'm not saying that they won't solve the problem. I'm just saying that the shape of their problem today is very interesting. Yeah, and I think that I think we should expect them to lean more and more into partnerships to help them solve this problem over the next 2 years. Because again, they don't have the same incentive structure that Claude does, right? Or Anthropic does. And so I just think it's a very interesting, board, so to speak, for how these things end up landing. But
Even if they were to launch their own version of these things, they don't have the decade plus of context that these other companies would. And I think that matters ultimately. But I find ChatGPT, I use it a lot for, and I was just thinking about, I probably have 1,000 plus chats in ChatGPT. And so like my wife and I were actually doing this last night. We were asking it questions about ourselves, and the depth of information it has about me is far deeper than what my wife has because we use it in different ways. But even in that context, I find I'm often annoyed by how little it knows about the things I about certain things, right? Because it has such a small piece of context ultimately. So I'll ask a question, I'm like, okay, well, that's totally wrong because it doesn't know anything about these other things. And then I would have to give it that context. And then at that point, it's like, well, I don't want to. I'm just not interested in doing that for whatever reason. But I think it's so good at some things. Like it knows a lot about how I think in a work capacity, but nothing about my personal life. Basically, not nothing, but like very little about my outside of work self. And like I'm sure if I asked it for certain things to buy that I would be interested, it probably would actually do a terrible job because it's all focused around one aspect of who I am.
You guys ever think
Yeah.
about how the cost to solve the problem first might not be worth the benefit? If you think about Apple, for example, not really taking part in the whole AI race right now, but maybe they don't have to because the cost to solve that problem a little bit further down the line is going to be fine. And they already have the penetration, they already have the user base. Or OpenAI falling behind in some ways, B2B. If they can have the user base, then maybe they make it out on top. I remember back with my first brand again, this guy told me I was an idiot. He was like, why are you making your products? Because everyone was just like reselling other people's products, right? And I used to look at some of the copycat brands that popped up after, and I imagine maybe you guys might feel this way about Format. No foreplay copycats. It's like, oh wow, it's become so cheap to solve the problem second, right? Maybe you've missed out on market share. Maybe you have a tall mountain to climb in terms of getting that user base and solving a problem that makes switching worthwhile. But yeah, I wonder if there's a competitive advantage to, I don't know, staying in second place until it's the right time.
Yeah, there's like a mountain of success stories of like waiting for someone else to like, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot that. Is it Bending Spoons? The European like software company that literally just sees what happens in America and then they just like copy it in Europe.
Yeah, you're thinking of Rocket Internet.
Rocket Internet. Sorry, Bending Spoons is like a PE fund, right?
I know.
Yeah, they just bought Vimeo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Rocket Internet or like, oh my God, who are the guys? Drata. They just like saw what Vanta did and said we're going to out execute them. I mean, like, I think this is
there's two things
Yeah.
here though. It's like one is like we're talking about public companies. So like what is the objective of a public company? It's like to create shareholder value most of the time in a smaller window than in which the asset is being underwritten for, which is like a weird dichotomy of the entire situation. And then like the other piece is like all of the companies that are deciding to go into this race is like their CapEx spend is like insane. And then you have the underlying strategy of your CapEx. So it's like for example, like I actually saw like a really good breakdown yesterday on like why Amazon share price is kind of like, seemingly has like a very shaky bottom to it. And it's that like their CapEx is actually spread across like so many different verticals that the idea that it's like the amount of CapEx is has enough density in any one vertical in which they're deploying it that it's going to like essentially win any of these races. And so it's like I think it's not just deciding on whether you want to stay in second place, but it's also deciding on which game you want to win in this situation, because like even public markets are like signaling the idea that like we understand that this is a race, we understand this is going to inquire like a crazy amount of capital expenditure over like past 2028, and like participation isn't just enough in this situation. Like you actually need to win because of how high the stakes are.
Yeah.
So you could also end up being like under a mountain of like infrastructure in which you can never get out of as well. Like that is also like a future that exists in trying to stay in second place.
Crazy time. I gotta go, guys, but this was super fun.
Catch you guys a bit.
Thanks for coming.
All right.